What is going on, everybody? I am your good friend Trey. I am here with Jake Tribbey today to talk DFS. This is the earliest possible look you will get at the Week 10 DFS main slate. Jake had an amazing weekend doing the early slate stuff. I put together almost a great lineup. We were talking about that in the green room. So without further ado, let's dive in and give you the best plays of the week. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
We're going to start at quarterback this week, a guy that's emerging over the last few weeks. Not that it's much of an emergence. We know he's a pretty solid player. Jake, why don't you tell us who you're liking at quarterback this week?
Yeah, so one of the major standout plays just looking at pricing this week was Justin Herbert. Prices the QB 21, just 5,200 on DraftKings, roughly as cheap on FanDuel at QB 20. The Chargers have posted a 5.8% pass rate over expectation since week 7. That would rank fourth highest over the full year. Over that stretch, Herbert ranks second in passing yards per game, sixth in total pass attempts, and 10th among quarterbacks in fantasy points per game. Keep in mind, these numbers could easily be better. On Sunday, Herbert scored 18 of his 19.5 fantasy points in the first half. The Chargers attempted just 11 passes in the second half because they maintained a 3-possession lead for the final 35 minutes of the game. Now, I do have some doubts that Tennessee's struggling offense can push the Chargers to a ceiling performance in Week 10, and the 8-point spread does reflect that. But Herbert is priced among the cheapest starters on the slate. Even after last week, he actually got a little bit cheaper, despite playing quite well since the Chargers bye in a surprisingly pass-heavy offense. I'd expect Herbert to pop as one of the best low-priced quarterback options on the Week 10 slate.
Yeah, nice little low price quarterback there, and some higher price guys. The chalk this week smacked pretty hard at running back. You got a running back play here that you're thinking about going to this week?
Yeah, the chalk was great last week, and I think Aaron Jones should be pretty chalky this week. He's only 6,700. That's RB12 on DraftKings. He's had 85% of backfield expected fantasy points and an 81% snap share over the last 3 weeks. Those are both top 3 numbers among running backs over the full season. In week 8, he led all running backs in snap share, and in week 9, he ranked second among running backs in route share and fifth in expected fantasy points. The recent workload for Aaron Jones has been tremendous. Outside of some empty snaps for Cam Akers, the entirety of backfield usage flows through Aaron Jones. And his Week 10 matchup with Jacksonville sets up beautifully. It's a top 2 on-paper matchup, according to our schedule-adjusted metrics. The Vikings' win probability is 66% here, according to Vegas. And Jones' rushing yards per game nearly doubles in wins since 2022, while his per-snap productivity jumps 53% while his team is leading. This looks like one of the best spots of the year to play a clearly underpriced Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones looked pretty fresh last year at the end of the season and still looking fresh in 2024. Another running back you're looking to go to. I'm not sure about this guy. He's either good or he's either terrible. I still haven't made up my mind. That'll probably be dictated on whether or not I actually put him in my lineup this week. But tell me about DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, so you say what you will about DeAndre Swift, but the workload has been really strong. He's earned at least 18 touches in 5 straight games, averaging 17.4 expected fantasy points per game and 20.9 fantasy points per game over that stretch. Marks that would both rank top 7 among running backs over the full year. Swift is effectively a bell cow priced as a high-end RB2, and that's a pricing mistake I'm pretty eager to take advantage of in this particular matchup. New England is the second softest schedule-adjusted matchup for opposing running backs on the ground. The Patriots have allowed the 7th most rushing yards per game and the 4th most yards after contact per attempt. Crucially, they've also allowed the 6th highest yards per carry on man or gap concept runs. Almost 60% of Swift's carries and 62% of his rushing yards have come on these man gap run concepts. The schematic and on-paper matchups here are great, as is the price. Swift will likely be one of the chalkiest running backs when the slate locks on Sunday because everything's just lining up for him this week.
From a couple vets there at running back to some young guns here at wide receivers, possibly the best rookie wide receiver so far this year. Malik Neighbors probably has an argument as well, but tell me a little bit about Brian Thomas this week.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting matchup for Brian Thomas Jr. He's a bit pricey at 6,600 on DraftKings. That's wide receiver 12, closer to the wide receiver 14 price tag on FanDuel, but the Vikings have been a top 4 schedule adjusted matchup for opposing outside wide receivers this year. They've allowed the 4th most receiving yards on throws of 15 plus yards, and Brian Thomas averages the 9th most receiving yards per game on throws of 15 plus yards. With Christian Kirk out of the fold, Thomas has earned 39% of Jacksonville's air yards if we just look at their healthy pass catchers. His workload against a defense that's funneled significant volume deep could be among his best of the season, especially in a game where Jacksonville should need to throw here as 4-point underdogs. But I should note that this is a take that's really only applicable to DFS tournaments. Thomas hasn't earned more than 6 targets in a game since week 6, and Trevor Lawrence just hasn't played well, only averaging a 61% completion percentage, the 8th lowest mark in the NFL among quarterbacks with at least 100 pass attempts. Still, we know Brian Thomas Jr. is a special talent, and he's one that has a chance to break the slate if this defense can simply let up a few big plays, and we know Jacksonville should be targeting them deep in week 10.
Let's stick in the AFC South here. As someone who owns a mansion on Anthony Richardson Island, not a great showing from Joe Flacco this weekend, but doesn't seem to matter for Josh Downs. I could be back there playing quarterback, and it seems like this guy's going to get home regardless. Tell me what you think about Josh Downs this week.
Yeah, Downs' volume with Flacco has been fantastic. He's averaging a 34% first read target share, 10 targets per game, and 17.3 expected fantasy points per game in the games Joe Flacco has started. If we extrapolate those metrics out to the full season, they would rank 8th best, 5th best, and 8th best among all wide receivers. We've said this over and over again, and the data continues to prove it. Downs is a mid-range wide receiver 1 with Joe Flacco at quarterback. His week 10 game with Buffalo might look like a tough matchup on the surface. The Buffalo pass defense has been fairly effective this year, but the Bills are a clear slot funnel, which is where Josh Downs runs 85% of his routes. Buffalo has allowed the 7th highest target share and the 8th most receiving yards per game to opposing players lined up in the slot this year. Downs is already getting fed targets in a Flacco-led offense, and we should only expect more in Week 10, given the matchup and the Colts' 35% implied win probability, which implies a fairly pass-heavy script here.
We talked about some of the chalk earlier in Alvin Kamara, still getting home even though we had a Taysom Hill week. Sounds like you're looking at a Taysom Hill month here. Tell me why you're liking the Storm and Mormon in Week 10.
Yeah, at only 4,000 on DraftKings, I'm always tempted by a guy who has Taysom Hill's role. Hill has earned at least 4 targets, at least 4 carries, and thrown at least 1 pass in back-to-back games. His role is something out of a 1949 offense, but the Swiss Army knife role only gets more valuable as these injuries pile up in New Orleans. The Saints are down 30% of their targets this season, with Chris Olave lost for the foreseeable future due to his concussion, and Rashid Shaheed done for the year. And Hill effectively functioned as their running back 2 in Week 9 since New Orleans was missing both Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. There are a lot of ways Hill can get you there for fantasy. Among the remaining healthy players in New Orleans, Hill is tied for the 2nd most end zone targets, and he's earned the 2nd most red zone carries, despite playing in just 5 games. It's very rare to get a $4,000 tight end on DraftKings who projects for double-digit touches. But that's what we're looking at with Hill until the Saints get healthy, which honestly may not happen this season.
I like it. Anytime I could shove cheap tight ends, I'll do it. I'll do it in the flex. I'll do it anywhere I can. So if you guys enjoyed what you heard here today, you can catch me, good friend Trey, on the NFL Best Bets podcast. You can catch Jake on Cashing Points. He has an article up at the website that'll be posted when you're watching this. He also does the DFS cage match with Neil Orfield. If you did not like what you heard today, consider getting a brain transplant. Thank you guys for watching, and good luck. We'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.